It's the incredibly speculative thoughts on Sumeru and the Dendro Archon. I am interested, to say the least. Since it's only 9 days away, dude. Sumeru's 9 days away. YouTube, if you're watching this, probably like 7 days away. Maybe even less.
Dendro is a weird element. Of the 7 elements in the game, it's the only one that's alive.
What? Okay.
Assuming that an in-game element, like hydro, is at least a representation of a real material state, like water, Dendro ends up being the only one actually based on something that's living.
Yeah, because Ashikai, I remember that. She said
Hydro's
water and hydro is different.
Water is essential for life, but it's not life itself. While Geo's counterpart, Earth, may house microbes and other organisms, but it's ultimately just rocks and minerals. Fire is just kinetic energy. Ice is likely the lack of kinetic energy, you know, since there's no such thing as cold, it's just the absence of heat. And Animo or...
Wait, what? No such thing as cold, it's just the absence of heat? But it's called sheer cold, not sheer absence of heat?
Since there's no such thing as cold, it's just the absence of heat.
Huh?
And Animo, or maybe wind, is just gas, which leaves electro, or electricity, as like the atomic form of raw energy.
Sucrose is just gassy.
But Dendro is associated with plants.
Yes.
Plants are alive.
Oh my god, they're alive.
I don't know how many times I have to say this, but they're alive. They're living. They're alive. They're not particles.
Yep, they're alive.
Plants aren't exactly a building block for a planet, and they can't be boiled down to something on a subatomic level like literally every other in-game element can.
Can't be boiled down to something on a subatomic level like every other element can. I guess, yeah, no, I guess every other element can. Damn, okay.
The other 6 elements are more or less types or parts of particles. But Dendro is an amalgamation of a lot of particles. In fact, it seems to be the only element that quite literally cannot exist without every other element.
Which might actually be the reason that there's multiple different types of reactions with Dendro. That would make a lot of sense.
Plants need water, or hydro, temperature, pyro and cryo, respiration, animo, and the ability to respond to external stimuli through electro, and, you know, food in the form of minerals, geo. And sure, underwater plants exist, but atomic elements are passed back and forth between the air and the surface of the water, so even those... You know what? Actually, that's not really important. That's not my point.
Look at Chang Sheng.
Dendro.
I would still love for Chang Sheng to be the actual playable character and why she's like the pet.
Why is Dendro our 7th element and not something like, I don't know, light?
Because that's the 8th element.
It is a very different type of particle compared to any of the others that the in-game elements are based on. And sure, it might have some questionable foundations for building out sensible reactions as far as game mechanics are concerned, but it fits in way better with all of the other elements than Dendro, of all things.
She has a really good point. It does.
Why Dendro? This question has been bugging me for ages, but I think I might have a little insight into the importance of Dendro, its possible game mechanics, and how all of that plays into the storyline of Sumeru. And maybe that'll give us a little bit of insight into the Dendro Archon herself.
Okay.
Now, this video is incredibly speculative.
A game theory.
And probably a bit premature, since we have very little real information on Dendro and Sumeru in general.
Oh, this was out during 2.2. God damn. Okay.
What would
this was a long time ago.
5 patches away or something? So while you're watching this, just keep that in mind.
5
I could end up
patches.
being wildly off base in the end, so take from it what you will.
Okay, that's fair.
And with that mere disclaimer out of the way, let's start with what we actually know about Dendro as an element, which honestly isn't much.
Yeah, bye, There
are only 2 Dendro enemies in the game right now. The Dendro Samachurl and the Dendro Slime.
Yeah, and there are wait, Dendro... Am I stupid? Oh yeah, the Dendro Slime. Yeah, I forgot, because the Dendro Slime isn't like the transparent kind of slime, it's like a thick slime. Okay. Like an opaque slime.
The Samachurls basically have 2 attacks. The first dispatches
Dendro
an
attacks
AoE
are so
field
annoying.
that applies Dendro to you and slowly saps your HP over time. while the second attack just summons some thorny vines that function more like a geoconstruct than anything
Dendro
else.
enemies are so annoying.
So set them on fire. Now, Dendro slimes actually have more or less the same abilities, casting the same sapping field around themselves.
Oh, you know what I just realized? Doesn't Cole's Cole and Amber thing look like the little Dendro slimes that bounce around?
Actually have more or less the
When
same
it does the
abilities,
ability?
casting the same
Into the ground, out of the ground,
sapping
into the
field
ground,
around
out of the
themselves,
ground.
But instead of summoning stationary vines, the slimes will summon some baby slimes that run around and bonk you on the head.
Ah,
Now,
interesting.
I could point out that the whole Dendro sapping mechanic is kinda similar to the Rift Hound's corrosion mechanic, and then try to pull you all down a rabbit hole tying Dendro to the abyss, but oh wait, that's exactly what I'm doing.
No.
Yeah,
What?
sure. Corrosion and Dendro sap similarities are tenuous at best, but I think the idea has merit, based on the fact that the Dendro Samaturl and the Dendro Slime both summon living things.
What are you doing, Ashikai?
You know what other magic-y power creates living things? Chemia, which means we're now talking about a very specific branch of forbidden alchemy, and we know that alchemy.
You know, every time I watch an Ashikai theory, I love Ashikai and I love her theories, but every single time I watch one, I always, at like 5 minutes into the video, I'm like, how the fuck did we get here?
And he uses massive amounts of elemental energy, which is stored within the ley lines, which are connected to Irminsul trees. I don't know if I really need to say this, but a tree is really just a big plant. And Dendro is the element of plants.
Yes.
So doesn't that make Dendro the element closest to the Irminsul trees? Since, you know, plants need basically all of the elements in order to live, and therefore alchemy and chemia needs all of the elements within the ley lines to create things. And do you see where I'm going with this?
Sure.
Well, blind speculation won't really get us anywhere, so let's take a look at the Dendro Archon and see if we can glean any more information from her instead.
Okay.
So conversations with Yae Miko seem to suggest the Dendro Archon is a young female god named Kusanali. I'm going to roll with that assumption for this video. Kusanali is also the youngest Archon at a mere 500 years old, give or take.
Oh,
her
so
predecessor
young.
having died during the Cataclysm. It's not clear whether or not
Wait, is she really the youngest at 500? Holy shit. Sometimes I forget how old, like, Venti and everyone is.
this is her actual age, or simply the age she ascended to the Archon position.
Interesting.
I'm gonna say both. Probably. I don't know how that works. They're gods. They're not humans. I don't know how the birthing process works. How do you birth a duck? You know what? Never mind. So this
Why did the caption say, how do you birth a duck? That's not... Oh.
Dendro Archon is known by the name Lesser Lord Kusanali in English, which is a pretty weird title to give your god when you really think about it.
Yeah, it is.
I'm pretty sure the Lesser Lord bit is just the English localization being weird again, because the Chinese title actually translates directly to Little Lucky Grass King, which is a far cuter title and a lot more appropriate for a young or
so
childlike
cute.
god. However, I am going to accept both of these titles, plus a third, which we will talk about in
Little
a bit,
Lucky
for
Grass
reasons I
King.
will get to in a minute.
I love that so much.
First off, Lesser Lord is a term usually used in place of vassal, as in a vassal state, meaning a person who rules a region of land at the direction of a lord or a higher authority. For all intents and purposes, they have similar wealth and standing to a lord, but they report back to a higher ranking lord, hence Lesser Lord. Keep this in mind, we'll come back to it later.
Okay.
Little Lucky Grass King, on the other hand, implies a higher rank than a lesser lord, since it's, well, a king. But since
True.
the king is little, it might be a situation where the king isn't the one in control of the country. Perhaps a regent is. At least until the king comes of age. We're dealing with gods here, so I'm not really sure how much age can really play into things, but I think the possibility that Kusanali is not the one governing Sumeru while still being their Archon is actually quite high.
You see, I'm still pretty curious in terms of who could be governing Sumeru, whether it's like a singular person or if it's going to be like the whole like academia, or if there's going to be like one big like I know there's the Grand Mage, but is it the whole academia that is governing them? Like, is that confirmed at this point, obviously?
Physical or mental development, something worth noting is that Kusanali's specifically associated with grass and flowers. Why is this important? Because it's a really specific affiliation within the whole
The sage is like the Chisig and Leo. Okay,
Why not
makes
the
sense.
god of moss or algae or, I don't know, trees, mushrooms?
Because Little Lucky Grass King just sounds so cute. Little Lucky Moss King wouldn't sound as cute, or Little Lucky Algae King.
Why isn't she just the god of flora in general? Why is it grass? I think that Kusanali's association specifically with grass has a lot more to do with her development as an Archon.
Oh.
Because she's so young, it's very possible that her power hasn't developed well enough for her to have full control over her entire element. This could explain why we only have one known Dendro user in the entire game currently, and only 2 Dendro enemies.
That's smart.
That's not a whole lot. There is actually evidence to suggest that her predecessor had more control over plants than Kusanali does. This is what is suggested in the story of the Viridescent Venerer. Now, I won't cover the entire story of this artifact set in the interest of time, but if you're interested, I highly recommend this video from Arlun Grun, as he does a great job of covering this set's lore.
Okay.
If you're not interested in the whole story, here's the highlights. The Viridescent Venerer was a hunter that lived around the time of the Cataclysm.
Oh, okay. I thought it was going to say fucking Tanari then, dude.
She used to be able to hear the whispers of the trees and the roots within the earth as she hunted the animals within the forest. But when the Cataclysm brought about the death of the god of the woods, the voices of the trees and the grass grew silent. This implies that some part of all plants, including the trees and grass and bushes and everything else, are tied to the existence and the power of the Dendro Archon.
That's interesting. Also, I wonder, I was thinking about this the other day. You know, like, there's, like, the god of salt, and there's, like, the god of the woods, and gods of, like, a lot of different things. It's not just, like, archons with electro, animo, that kind of stuff. There's gods for, like, a lot of different things. Is there, like, a god of snow for, like, dragon spine kind of stuff? Will there be a god of sand for the Sumeru desert? That'd be interesting.
In other words, the god that rules the woods. Now, with the birth of the new Dendro Archon, who's associated with grass specifically, we can assume that at least some part of the Dendro element can reach plants once more.
True.
You may notice that while in elemental sight, all instances of grass are infused with Dendro, but never trees or bushes. On the one hand, it could just be a game mechanic since we can set fire to grass and not trees, but MiHoYo is well known for doing their best to blur the lines between game mechanic and their world building, so I'm inclined to believe that this does mean that the reach of the Dendro Archon is somewhat limited. Power levels aside, while perhaps not the one...
I don't know about that. Because wouldn't that mean, I don't know, even for like geo stuff, like we can only see like breakable rocks, but we can't, it doesn't show like the mountains and stuff, or like even the huge things that Zhongli dropped in the ocean. I don't know.
Governing
It's very
the region
interesting.
on a day-to-day basis, Kusanali does appear to play a role similar to that of Morax in Liyue. Where Morax would descend once a year to provide knowledge and guidance, Kusanali appears to provide a sort of agricultural blessing on the land known as the Anahitian Blessing on a yearly basis.
Okay.
Specifically on her birthday, which the locals call the
The subtitles sent me, dude. I'm sorry.
Specifically on her birthday, which the locals call the Day of Grass. This is where things start to get interesting, because the Anahitian Blessing is a reference to Anahit, which is the name of an Iranian goddess of fertility, water, and wisdom.
Ooh.
This checks out since the Anahitian Blessing is supposed to bring forth bountiful crops. But the real takeaway here isn't what the goddess governs over, but where she originated from: Iran. This gives us a general geographic region for Sumeru's primary source of inspiration.
God, I just gotta say, dude, like, this kind of setting with the pillars and stuff and the ruins is fucking incredible. Like, real life, game, music video, I don't care. It fucking looks so stunning. I would love to visit a place like this. Oh my god.
But actually, it's
love
not
it.
just Iran. There are references throughout the entire game that we'll go over in a little bit that reference Buddhism, Hinduism, Egyptian mythology, and even some small references to Greek and or Roman influences.
See, I know a lot about Egyptian mythology and Greek mythology, but
seem like a really wide
not too much about religion, so this will be
it's
interesting.
The perfect mix for not only an incredibly specific location, but a very specific time period. We're talking about the early Persian Empire around 600 BCE or before Common Era, which encompassed a great deal of the Middle East from Iran to India to Egypt. This large geographic expanse of the Persian Empire resulted in a very multicultural civilization that shared a lot of similarities between their otherwise very distinct belief systems, folklore, and mythology. However, the predominant religion of the Persian Empire was actually Zoroastrianism, which we'll talk more about later and also in a separate video.
Okay.
This was the religion of Cyrus the Great, who succeeded the throne around 559 BCE, which is about the time period I think Sumeru is based off of. Now, I'm basing this time period off of a few things, but the most notable one that you'll find interesting is actually a character in Genshin by the name of Sino.
Yes! I think it looks very Anubis-inspired, but I absolutely did. All you know this already, but I love Sino's design.
You might recognize him from the Travail trailer.
Yep.
Now, all characters featured in the Travail trailer are important, but perhaps not the focus of the Archon quest in their respective regions. So it's safe to assume
Sino's the god of sand.
that Sino plays at least a significant role in the Sumeru. I'm going to guess it'll be the equivalent to that of, like, Ningguang's role in Liyue.
Hey, that'd be cool.
So she was there, she was important, but not the focus. Okay?
The hidden 5-star?
Sino quite literally means dog in Greek.
Wait, does it? Wait, does it?
Sino quite literally means dog in Greek. Which is hilarious when you consider the fact that he's covered in references to Anubis, the Egyptian god of the dead. Who is, a jackal.
Yeah.
And as previously stated, parts of Egypt were indeed included within the Persian Empire of this time period.
Have we ever seen him with his hood down?
Fairly appropriate, all things considered. Of course, you could make the case that because his clothing is so heavily inspired by Egyptian mythology that Sumeru should in fact be placed in Egypt. However, the name Sino has an additional significance to the exact time period of the early Persian Empire beyond its Greek roots, because Sino is the name of Cyrus the Great's adoptive mother.
Ooh.
She wasn't royalty, and neither was her husband, Thridates.
Now, sorry, I'm interested in this especially. Look, I love Egyptian mythology and stuff. However, there's already a lot of like Persian references in the trailers and the teasers that we've got, especially with Nilu's horns. And similarly looking like Ajdahar's horns, which are apparently, I wasn't aware of this until the other week, derivative from like Persian influence, which is really, really cool. So it makes me think that there is going to be a lot of reference to like Persian knowledge that I'm not already aware of. So I'm curious about this.
Mother. She wasn't royalty, and neither was her husband, Thridates. The story goes that Mithridates was ordered to kill the future Cyrus the Great by his grandfather. But instead of killing him, Mithridates and his wife, Sino, raised him secretly until the age of 10, passing off their own stillborn child as the murdered prince.
Oh my god.
Cyrus the Great then went on to not only seize the throne, but found the Zoroastrian Persian Empire. Not bad for a dead man. Although, you kind of have to wonder, if Sino and Mithridates pretended to kill the prince and then raised him as their own, is it possible that we're dealing with a situation wherein the Dendro Archon also faked their own death? Like a thematic parallel? But anyway, when you consider our earlier assumptions about Kusanali perhaps having a regent govern for her due to her young age, we might be able to guess that Sino's relationship with her is something akin to that of a caretaker, or better yet, he may be one of several wisdom kings.
Oh my god, I'll read this. It would actually make sense because let's be honest, we're not, we're not starved of caretakers in Genshin, we have Zhongli for Zhao and pretty much everybody. We could have another caretaker for another region. It wouldn't be the most oblivious thing to happen.
Or perhaps
Sumeru actually does have a ruling class called the Sages. Yes. Okay.
Vassals
Jesus Christ.
of the Lord of Wisdom would be a better way to phrase it. a type of governmental office, if you will. Ironically, this was actually how the governing structure of the Persian Empire was constructed. There was one great king, in this case Cyrus the Great, who was then supported by several vassals that were each in charge of their own regions, called satraps.
What?
It's unlikely that Sumeru will be so large as to require individual rulers for parcels of land, but Sumeru is also known as the land of scholars and is primarily famous for its academy. So it's more likely that the area of governance is more bureaucratic or academic than it is like a physical landmass.
I agree.
There may be a vassal for commerce, medicine, biology, chemistry, history, philosophy, and the list goes on. Each vassal could potentially make decisions regarding their area of expertise as it applies to the region of Sumeru as a whole, or maybe they're just like the head researcher there, head professor,
Hey, this makes a lot of sense, dude, now that we know what we know.
After all, Sumeru is quite well known for being one of the only places to study at a really high level, and it therefore attracts students from all over Teyvat. This was also true of the Persian Empire, which attracted students from all over Europe and Asia to study at its capital. Lisa, Baizu, Signora, and Dottore have all studied at the Sumeru Academy, so it's not a stretch to assume that these heads of office might not be Sumeru natives.
Is it just me, or does Dottore seem to have been so many fucking places, dude? Dottore seems to have been everywhere, especially from, like, the manga stuff up to, like, it's insane.
Not a stretch to assume that these heads of office might not be Sumeru natives on the whole. In fact, it's possible that the vassal for medicine might actually be Baizu. Yeah, I know he's from Liyue, but he's kinda suspicious. Not only did he study at Sumeru Academy, but he looks suspiciously like the Hindu deity Shiva, right down to the snake around him.
Holy shit. Wait, what? That's insane, dude. I didn't even know about that. Changshen is the Dendro Archon.
That would be fine if it were the only reference, but Baizu then goes on to take design inspiration from not one, but two Chinese myths about snakes specifically.
Wait.
One about a pharmacist, and he's a pharmacist, and another about a quest for immortality, which he's studying with Chi-Chi, and that's all before we even mention the fact that
he's not studying it with Chi-Chi, he's bringing her along for the journey because he's using her, I tell you.
Immortality, which he's studying with Chi-Chi, and that's all before we even mention the fact that he's the only Dendro user we've ever encountered. A Dendro user that's super tied to snakes. He's like a walking billboard advertising his Sumeru connections.
He kind of is.
Hang on, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. We'll talk about this in a second, but let's back up a bit and talk more about the Hindu and Zoroastrian roots of Sumeru before I get severely distracted by the snakes again.
Okay, that's fine. I'm already distracted by the snakes.
In a minute, I promise. Just keep it in the back of your mind for now, because it is important.
Okay.
I previously talked about how the Anahitian blessing was likely a reference to the goddess Anahit. She is an Iranian deity originally, and she does predate the Persian Empire. She was adopted into Zoroastrianism during the early years of the Persian Empire. Where she was once a Hindu deva, she then became a Zoroastrian Yazata, which
there's a lot of big words here that I've never heard before. I was trying to think of the right word for it.
Once a Hindu deva, she then became a Zoroastrian Yazata, which is effectively what Zoroastrians call their three most powerful divinities. Just beneath the Yazatas in terms of rank are beings known as the Amesha Spenta. The Yazatas and the Spenta were beings that were supposed to be worshipped, while a second class of beings, the Devas, were meant to be rejected. Interestingly enough, in Japanese, Kusanali is called Kusanali Devi. See, I told you we circle back to this later. Now, a Devi is simply a female Deva, at least in Buddhist and Hindu practices, and seeing how Kusanali may be a direct reference to the Kusanali Jataka, which is a poem about the birth of Buddha that involves an encounter with a tree spirit, it's likely that this isn't a localization mishap, but rather an intentional change. Now, the confusing part here is that in Zoroastrianism, devas were bad, whereas in Buddhism and Hinduism, devas are good. The terms apparently have similar linguistic roots, but they are fundamentally different. On a really basic level, a deva could be seen as a type of angel in Hindu mythology, while an Ashura is like a devil. And then if you swap into Zoroastrianism, those rules change and the devils become the angels and the angels become the devils. I feel like I just made the confusion worse.
I'm glad she's self-aware.
Anyway, for this reason, I think that the term Devi in Kusanali's Japanese title is more of a reference to how the word demon is used in the phrase demon god, which is what the archons are called in Chinese.
Oh god, okay.
Mixing both the good and the bad, the positive and the negative attributes of a divine being, all into one nice neat little package. Incidentally, there is one Zoroastrian Spenta, Ameritat, who is the personification of life and the protector of plants, who is constantly opposed by the Deva, Zarek, who governs over aging and is known for poisoning plants. Coincidence? Well, maybe. But it does support my idea of her controlling both positive and negative aspects.
What is he holding?
Okay. Now we can talk about snakes.
My hand.
Well, specifically, I want to talk about Nagas. Now, Nagas are a traditionally beneficial race of mythological beings that are specifically Hindu in origin.
Okay.
Note there's a lot of Hindu mythology here. They are half human, half serpent, demigod-like beings, but they vary.
That's terrifying, dude. I used to have nightmares about Medusa, and it wasn't even that she turned me to stone. It was that all the snakes would just wrap around me so I couldn't move, and she'd just stare at me.
In appearance. Sometimes they look completely human with some snake-like characteristics, and they often wear another snake around their neck. Or they can look like a very normal snake, but then possess some unusual abilities, such as speech. Or they can look like a mixture of both, human and snake, typically possessing the upper body of a human with the tail of a snake in place of their legs.
That terrifies me, I'm sorry.
Nagas are often venomous, which is interesting given our recent talk about poisoning plants, and are also associated with bodies of water, such as rivers, which is...
Okay, this might be a really stupid question, because I'm assuming we already have, but have we ever seen Chang Sheng's tail? Like the end of it? Wait, we haven't? What if Chang Sheng is coming out of Baiju? And not in a weird way. Well, in a weird, like a strange way, but not in a, you know what I mean.
Interesting given our conversations about Anahit. This is noteworthy because Nagas are typically seen as intermediaries between humans and the Devas of Hindu mythology. They're like, you know, the go-between between the mundane and the divine. And sometimes Nagas are even considered to be types of dragons, which is actually kind of a reoccurring theme in Asian mythology, as a lot of different cultures throughout Asia believe that snakes are something akin to, like, baby dragons.
I would absolutely love for... question, because it's been a while since I read the manga. It has been a while. You know the big bad dragon? Did it ever, like, die during... The dragon that was in the manga that went... If that was manga. Ursa the Drake. Yeah, Ursa the Drake. Ursa the Drake did die. Okay, fair. I want another dragon in Genshin, but like a real bad dragon instead of like Dvalin, which is good but confused, I guess. I want a bad dragon, a badass bitch that will just fucking fry everybody in their path.
Now, in some parts of the world, like Thailand and Sri Lanka, the Nagas were considered to be from the underworld, or they were subterranean beings. They're also said to be a race that controlled the 7 oceans and the 7 mountains, and they have 7 races within the Naga society as a whole.
That's a lot of sevens.
Associated with the different color of the rainbow. Kind of like our 7 archons with 7 elements and 7 colors of the rainbow. Anyway. And you're probably wondering what the heck all of this has to do with Dendro and Sumeru and all of that stuff beyond just having Hindu roots and therefore
I forgot this video was
Persian
about
Empire.
Sumeru.
Well,
For a second.
There's this Hindu deity, a rather important one, actually, who leads the Nagas. His name is Virupaxa. He is one of the 4 heavenly kings governing over the western direction and lives on the western part
Would you say a sustainer of heavenly principles?
of Mount Sumeru. Now you're following, right? So yeah, I think Sumeru has snakes. That's my prediction. Oh, and Sumeru also has Yaksha. What's this you say? The Yaksha are from Liyue? No. My poor misguided viewer. I don't actually think that's quite right. Consider this. The only Yaksha we know a whole lot about is Xiao. He's considered an Adepti, but within the Adepti, the Yaksha, as a group, were rather unique. I feel like the Yaksha deserve their own video at some point, but for now, we'll just take a brief look at Xiao. So for those of you who haven't read his character story, it goes something like this.
Okay, just remember as well, for those watching the reaction at this point, if you're watching this video for the first time, this was done in 2.2. So this was way before the other Yaksha lore came out. So I know she's made another Yaksha video at this point. But if anything is like wrong in this one, or I mean, it's a theory anyway, but you know, there's things that have newly been confirmed since this, is what I'm trying to say.
Before and during the Archon War, Shao was enslaved by an ancient unnamed god that forced him to carry out very cruel and very violent acts. It was Morax that killed this god, thus freeing Shao from his servitude. He then gave this young Yaksha the name Shao to use in place of his original name, Alatus, supposedly for his own protection.
So Alatus was his original name, but that name is the one that could be used to subdue Zhao, right? Which is interesting to me because, again, we go back to the Zhao Archon quest, where he just openly told the Traveler, Paimon, and a couple of other people, I think, that his old name was Alatus.
This is the
like he had no worries that they'd use it against him
Shao's
in the future.
Loyalty. Now, Alatus means winged, and it's referencing the fact that Shao's animal form is that of a bird. However, in Chinese, Shao's name is actually Golden Peng, which is further referenced by the Chinese translation of his constellation, which is, specifically, Golden Winged Peng King. And that is a title of a Buddhist deity derived from the Indian god Garuda. This god is one of 8 demigods that helps guard Mount Sumeru. You can read a little bit more about this on this really awesome Reddit post by Alois. I'll leave a link below. Now here's the thing. Liyue borders Sumeru, at least in part because of the chasm that lies between them. I think it's very likely that the god that enslaved Shao during the Archon War governed over a region that bordered Liyue. That was why Morax ended up in conflict with them. It was probably just a border dispute.
At first, when Ashikai said that the Yakshas might be from Sumeru and not Liyue, I was like, yeah, there's no shot, dude. That makes no sense. But holy fuck, this makes too much sense at this point.
Now, the reason I bring this up, because I know it seems like a really long tangent, is because the Nagas are the mortal enemies of the Garudas in Hindu mythology. Nagas are likely the beings currently in favor within Sumeru, but perhaps it wasn't always that way. Perhaps at one point, Sumeru was actually the land of the Garudas. And that, my friends, brings me to a bit of a wild guess of a somewhat loose, bizarre little theory.
These are some of my favorite parts of Ashikai videos where, like, even she will say, like, it's a stretch or it's a bizarre, wild kind of thing. And then sometimes she will go off on this tangent that makes no sense, or she will hit the nail on the head. And there's usually no in between.
Yes, this whole thing so far was just context for this one theory that I still haven't outlined yet.
Yeah, it's unhinged in the best way.
Here's the thing.
Okay, what's the thing?
I've recently come to the realization that Genshin has this weird recurring theme of snake versus bird. For example, Dainsleif, who is from the subterranean nation of Conria, which was swallowed by the Abyss, has the constellation Snake Ring, or Ouroboros. He seeks to fight the divine. Now, I have hypothesized in this previous video, hint, hint, right here, that the symbol of the battle pass is a Homa symbol, the same Homa symbol that can be seen in the so-called wings of the statue of the omnipresent god, and also on the spear tip of the staff of Homa. In the video, I also linked the statue of the omnipresent god to the likeness of the Welkin moon, which would then make it a statue of the moon goddess, or at least one of them, and thereby making the Homa symbol one of the divine, or the heavens. Thereby making the Homa symbol one of the divine, or the heavens. Now, Homa is also a type of mythological bird associated with golden pangs and phoenixes. You know, like Shao. And within the same battle pass that uses the Homa symbol as its identifier, what do we have?
What?
It's a black snake that guards a pearl that a crowned heir descended from the heavens in order to steal. You know, If snakes are often considered baby dragons and Chinese dragons are always paired with their precious pearl, then the Genesis Pearl may rightly belong to the snake in the battle pass.
Oh, fuck.
And the crowned heir might actually be the one in the wrong here.
The Battle Pass snake is the hero we needed all along. It's like the rat from Avengers.
Okay, we do not have time to go down another rabbit hole. Just food for thought. We'll take care of it later. I'll probably make another video on it, but anyway.
Okay. Can we get a playable
let's get back
snake?
on track. You remember that Nagas are considered subterranean beings?
Yes.
That implies that snakes live below and birds live above.
But the
Now, we
world's
also
upside down,
know that
fake sky
Genshin
and
pulls
stuff.
heavy inspiration from Norse mythology, specifically its cosmology. It often references a world tree like Yggdrasil,
Yes.
and in Norse mythology there is in fact a serpent, Nidhogger, that gnaws on the roots of said tree.
Isn't Nidhogg also a dragon name in some kind of mythology? Not just a snake name in Norse. Also, they have the world serpent and the world tree.
In fact, a serpent, Nidhogger, that gnaws on the roots of said tree. And in said tree, there is an unnamed eagle nesting in its upper branches.
Oh, wow.
Which reach to the heavens. Now, according to Albedo, Irminsul trees, which are connected to the world trees, are found predominantly underground. They also connect to the ley lines, which are full of elemental energy, and elemental energy is used to perform alchemy, and the form of alchemy that is unique to the underground nation of Conria is chemia, which is the art that can create life.
I think I know where she's going with this, but I'm interested now. What if, obviously she's heavily referring to these kind of trees when she says like about the tree stuff, but what about the underground tree in the chasm that we found with the seed? Obviously it wasn't out at this point, but wouldn't that make a lot more sense?
And its upper branches, which reach to the heavens.
We got a seed.
Now, according to Albedo, Irminsul trees, which are connected to the world trees, are found predominantly underground. They also connect to the ley lines, which are full of elemental energy,
It's
and
underground.
elemental energy is used to perform alchemy, and the form of alchemy that is unique to the underground nation of Conria is chemia, which is the art that can create life.
What if we use the seed that we got from the underground tree in the chasm in alchemy to create life?
I would therefore like to formally put forth the hypothesis that Dendro is the element of the abyss, or at least the element with the strongest ties to Conria that was swallowed by the abyss.
Oh my god, the seed is how we revive Signora.
It is the element of the creation of life, and ultimately death, because you know, the two are intertwined. Now, Conria was destroyed presumably because they overstepped their bounds and tried to seize power or knowledge that supposedly didn't belong to them, thereby making them an enemy of the divine. I won't speculate on who shot first because ultimately it just doesn't matter. Teyvat, as a whole, has a very long history of civilizations being routinely obliterated, supposedly for a very similar reason to Conria. Or so the in-game mythos goes. So I have to ask, doesn't this focus on wisdom or knowledge as something that can garner the wrath of the divine feel like a rather ominous foreshadowing for the fate of a country that worships the god of wisdom?
Oh god.
I think it does. Remember, in the Travail trailer, Dainsleif specifically says the god of wisdom's enemy is wisdom itself. If you really think about it, this tells you all you need to know about what's going on in Sumeru.
The god of wisdom's enemy is wisdom itself, and obviously we have the new thing in Sumeru, which is the divine knowledge capsule, and it can send people insane.
And what role Kusanali is probably playing. I suspect that Kusanali knows far more than she'll ever divulge, perhaps even knowledge that could bring the destruction to an entire nation. Being the one closest to the trees, and thus perhaps to the world tree itself, she may actually be the type to try and misdirect those around her by suggesting they study in one field over another, encouraging obsessive research behavior that would effectively serve as blinders to the truth. Preventing her nation of scholars from looking at things they shouldn't, hiding important things in plain sight, as it were. You can't see the forest for the trees, right? Although it is equally possible that Kusanali herself doesn't know all that much, what with her being the youngest Archon and all. And perhaps she is simply a relentless researcher that gets so stuck into her reading that she forgets to eat.
This is really interesting.
Maybe she's leading by example, ridiculously hungry for knowledge and desperate to surpass her predecessor by uncovering hidden wisdom that they somehow couldn't.
Oh my god, I'm
Anything's possible at
I'm thinking of a lot of things right now. Let me note some things down.
this point. But regardless, I think Dendro as an element is suspicious as hell.
This whole video is like a lot about Dendro and the Dendro Archon, but I've taken everything else from it.
I'm expecting to see a ton of snake iconography, as well as references to the entirety of Cyrus the Great's Persian Empire when we get to Sumeru. I'm also expecting heavy ties to the Abyss, and if ever there were a time for the Abyss Order to make a reappearance,
And they will.
or for a named non-villain character to, die,
What do you... Don't say Dane.
Sumeru would be the ideal time. I will be absolutely shocked if we don't get a Dainsleif quest, and I'll also be expecting to meet at least one new Harbinger alongside Dottore.
Oh.
If he doesn't show up there, I don't know when he'll show up.
I agree. If Dottore doesn't show up in Sumeru, I'm going to be a little bit not upset, because obviously there's a time and a place for everything that happens in Genshin, but I am definitely expecting Dottore to show up. 100%. Scaramouche prob? Yeah, honestly, since we already have seen him in-game, yeah, that makes sense.
After all, we know that he experimented on Kolei in the comic, and when he did that, they were in Sumeru. And, do you remember what kind of entity he placed inside her? It was a big, black snake. So, black snake, scientist, green element, someone quite young, maybe Miss...
I don't know. What is... Wait, why is everyone saying, oh no, fuck? Wait, what is this? Stop? Wait, what do you mean stop? Wait, I was going to say this character looks cool, but I've never seen that. Wait, this is Honkai? Oh shit, okay, let me skip a little bit.
Dendro and Sumeru are quite a ways off, at least a couple of months for
Okay,
Dendro,
never
and I'm
mind.
gonna guess like 9 months-ish for Sumeru proper, but I am itching to hear your theories, ideas, and hopes for both the element, inspirations, region, and the whole story.
Yes,
I'm like
same
really
here,
hyped for
Ashikai,
this
same
region
here.
in general. I know we still haven't left Inazuma yet, but that's completely beside the point. So, please leave a comment down below. Let me know. I can't wait to hear from you guys. And that's all I have for now. So, thanks for watching. Take care, and I guess I'll catch you next time.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye for now. Chat, if you don't already follow Ashikai, make sure you follow her. You drop her a follow. YouTube, make sure you subscribe to Ashikai. Links will be in the description below. And thank you for watching the video if this ends up on YouTube. Thank you.